Cool. I think it's so important. There's so much in media, whether it's the news, in video games, in culture, in movies and TV shows that focus on the violence, the war side of things. There's like how many movies have we seen that are based on war? How many documentaries are based on war? And there's not that many that talk about the peace building side, right? There's not that many that talk about negotiations or peace building or development work or even just basic diplomacy, right? It was a few months ago. The movie Oslo came out on HBO Max or HBO Go, whatever it's called today. And it's all about the Oslo Accords, the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, this is the first time I've seen a movie in a very long time that only focuses on hard, behind the scenes negotiation work. And people just don't see it. And I think there's this, self-fulfilling prophecy in some way where it's like, well, war and violence sells, so we keep making those things, but we've never really put the other side out there. We've never shown people what peace building work looks like. We've never shown people what, negotiations work looks like. So maybe people would be interested in it if they learn more about it. It's not there for them. And so creating games, that can do some of that work as well, and not just a boring model UN game or something, but in other ways that can bring people in is a great idea.
Yeah, no, we feel the same way. And it's I often talk about how our whole life we're taught, and it's not just through school, but through the media we consume, just like you're saying, is that, the only way to win is to beat the enemy. That is the way you have to defeat the other side. But if you actually shift your objective from destroy the other side to make them an ally, prevent harm, actually solve a problem, we would get so far. And we've been raised with this okay, it's fight or flight,
right?
Do or die. These are your only two options. But if you behave aggressively in a conflict situation, the chances of retaliation is really high. If you behave passively, then you're going to get walked all over and you're going to leave victims vulnerable. But between passive and aggressive, there's all these other opportunities and ways that some of them are creative and some of them are just common sense. So just, if you stop and think about it, they can actually de-escalate a situation. Yep. And that can actually achieve what you want. I talk about this all the time. I played sports. I was a volleyball player in college, and you show up to the game, you play the other side, you beat them, and then they go home and you celebrate and you're yeah, we won. You don't have to ride in the bus with them. And it's
right.
the real world actually doesn't work that way. We have to ride in the bus home with the people. Republicans and Democrats together have to pass laws together. We have to all we can't. We're not Thanos. Yeah. We can't just snap our fingers and make.
And even in everyday life, our everyday lives revolve more around negotiations and interpersonal dialogue than it does war, right? Even if you're a parent, I know that you have a child, you're negotiating bedtimes, you're negotiating food, you're negotiating what activities you're going to do. Your kids grow up negotiating at an early age, right? And so that's part of our culture. It's part of what we do day in and day out, whether that's deadlines for work, whether that's, what you want to do with your partner, if you want to go out to, see this movie or that movie. I mean, those don't end in violent altercations daily. I mean, if they did that, we would be in, a much worse situation than we currently are. But most of our interactions is in that, peace building, dialogue, negotiations, work. And we just don't talk about it enough. So people don't think about it that way. It's I always say the training on nonviolence and negotiations and peace building that we get in school starts with sharing. Maybe when you're in nursery school or kindergarten, maybe you learn a little bit about, Kingian nonviolence, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, something like that. And that's about it. That's all you get,
You don't know what it looks like. You're exactly right. And it's I remember when I first got into peace building, I came from more of I wasn't even advocacy, but that's what I thought. I was there's advocacy. It's I know what that looks like, but I couldn't picture what peace building looked like. And then I got involved at Search, and one of my first jobs, I ran their communications department. And so one of my first things was okay, let's rebrand this thing. Let's, because we kept talking about peace and commonality, and no one can picture that. If you say war, there's an image that comes into your mind. And one of the things I do in my social change communication trainings is the start of every training, I ask, okay, when you see this word peace, what image comes to your mind?
Right.
And it's amazing. And for me, it's always fascinating, because when I'm in Africa, it's always people holding hands. It's people holding hands together. When I was in Colombia, it was water. It was peace. They thought of water. They thought of
the calming, tranquil. Yeah.
comment, like, if you're in the US, it depends. Maybe you think of like hippies, peace glasses, you think of doves, you
Yep.
know.
I think in the US especially, because like, I've been abroad too, and I talk about these things in similar ways. And I think in the US, peace has the most negative connotation
Yes.
out of all the places I've been to and spoken to people about peace. And it's really interesting and bizarre and also quite telling. Like I think it's so ingrained in our psyche, in our history, and like this like mythology that exists with Americans, that being the tough guy, being the violent one, being whether it's from the Wild West, American Revolution, like any of these kinds of things, we don't really think about peace in a positive way often. It's
No.
weird.
No, we don't. We like we don't think of the word peace, like peace has such baggage to it, like
Hmm.
so much baggage to it, that literally I advocate all the time to not use it.
Yeah.
Like I'm very much like, because I know like there is a train of thought that's like, okay, we need to like re-educate people on like
Sure.
what peace is. We need to re-educate people on what these terms are, like privilege and racism and all these things. But for me, it's really about like, okay, like where is my audience right now? Like I can't reach them where I want them to be. I need to reach them
Right.
where they are right now. If they're at a place where they think peace means all this stuff, I'm going to say the word peace and their mind's going to go over here. So I need to figure out different ways to get it across. And that's why, like, when we talk about, I mean, if you look at our game World Reborn and like what we do at Wicked Saint Studios, is conflict transformation, it's peace building, but we call it common ground activism.
Hmm.
Because I think there also is these kind of two trains of thought of sometimes as a peace builder, you do need to stay. It's impossible to be truly neutral, but you're
Sure.
supposed to stay, as unbiased as possible so that you can mediate situations. But there's this other side of peace building where it's like, no, like I can maintain my identity and my beliefs, but I need to change my response and like
Right.
how I respond to this. And like I need to use these different techniques and how I still need to engage with this other person I disagree with and figure out the goals, whether it's to prevent this harm that's happening or whether it's to like get fresh water, like whatever it is. Like, and so that's why we talk about now as common ground activism, because Search for Common Ground has a common ground approach.
Sure.
But then we've also taken in a lot of violence prevention techniques
Hmm.
and things like that, because we have some great friends in the field. And so we've kind of like mashed that in there. But we really want, the goal is like, no, like peace building isn't sitting back. It's not being passive. Like
Right.
it's like
No, it can't be. I mean, if you want to succeed, you need to play an active role. You need to be out there. You need to be
you got to
engaging,
engage. Yeah,
for
you got to
sure.
engage. And it takes a lot of courage,
Mhm. And
but
time too, right? Like, you're not gonna change everything overnight, and I think that's something
no,
that is lost on people often is, we're gonna like, start a program, whether it's, from organizations or donors or, people that are on the receiving end. Sometimes there's this, like, mythology that you think, "Oh, we can do a program, it's gonna last a year, and then we're gonna have this, like, amazing transformation," and it doesn't usually work that way. It takes a lot longer.
it takes a lot longer. And that's one of the reasons why we first started Battle for Humanity is like we're training all these youth in our programs all over the world. And he's like, you have like most of the times it's like you have like one day, maybe it's a 4-week program, but usually they don't even last that long. You'll have like a couple
Right.
training periods and then they go back and there's like no
Mhm.
real support. And so we're like, what if we can build this like global community, that's like out there doing stuff, or like giving them tools in a way that's fun that they continue to practice
Sure.
and they're connected to, and they just like have stuff to do,
Yep.
and to progress. We don't lose these folks because it takes, as you're saying, it takes time.